The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Prince William adjusted his tie for what felt like the 100th time. His hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness about the day ahead, but from the weight of what this farewell truly meant. Kate stood beside him at their bedroom window, watching their children play in the garden below, unaware that their parents were about to make a decision that would change the royal family forever. The couple had been planning this moment for months, but the reality of it felt surreal. After years of dedicated service to the crown, they had decided to step back from their royal duties to focus on their family and personal well-being. The decision hadn't come lightly, and it certainly hadn't come without controversy within the palace walls. Kate turned from the window, her blue dress carefully chosen for today's significance. She had picked something simple yet elegant, knowing that every detail would be scrutinized by the media and the public. The dress represented who she truly was beneath all the royal protocol: a mother, a wife, and a woman who valued authenticity over pageantry. The morning had started like many others, with breakfast prepared by their personal chef and the children chattering about their plans for the day. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no idea that their parents were about to attend their final official engagement as working royals. The couple had decided to keep the children's routine as normal as possible, protecting them from the media storm that was sure to follow. William's phone buzzed constantly with messages from palace staff, journalists, and family members. Each notification reminded him of the magnitude of their decision. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had been surprisingly understanding when they first approached her about stepping back. She had lived through enough family controversies to recognize when someone truly needed space to heal and grow. The breakfast table conversation was filled with the usual family banter. Charlotte excitedly described her latest art project, while George discussed his upcoming school football match. Louis, still young and carefree, was more interested in seeing how much cereal he could balance on his spoon. These precious moments of normalcy had become increasingly rare as their royal obligations grew more demanding. Kate caught William's eye across the table and offered a reassuring smile. They had talked extensively about this day, rehearsing not just what they would say publicly, but how they would handle the emotional weight of saying goodbye to a life they had known for over a decade. Their relationship had been tested by the pressures of royal life, but it had also been strengthened by their shared commitment to putting family first. As the children finished breakfast and headed off with their nanny for their daily activities, William and Kate found themselves alone in the dining room. The silence was both peaceful and heavy with anticipation. They had spent so many mornings like this preparing for public engagements, but this one felt different. There was a finality to it that neither had fully prepared for. Kate reached across the table and took William's hand. Her touch was warm and steady, grounding him in the moment. They didn't need to speak. Their connection had deepened over the years to the point where words were often unnecessary. She understood his internal struggle between duty and personal happiness, just as he understood her desire to give their children a more private childhood. The couple rose from the table together, knowing that their security detail was already positioned outside, waiting to escort them to their final official engagement. The event was a charity function for mental health awareness, a cause that had become deeply personal to both of them. It seemed fitting that their last official act would be supporting an organization that helped others navigate life's challenges. William straightened his jacket one final time and looked at Kate with a mixture of sadness and relief. They were about to close one chapter of their lives and open another, uncertain but hopeful. The decision to step back hadn't been about abandoning their responsibilities, but rather about redefining them in a way that honored both their commitment to service and their commitment to each other. As they walked toward the door, Kate paused to look back at their home. These walls had witnessed countless private moments, celebrations, arguments, quiet evenings, and early morning conversations about their future. Soon they would be packing up these memories and starting fresh somewhere new, away from the constant scrutiny and endless obligations. The sound of car engines outside reminded them that the world was waiting. Their security team had planned every detail of today's movements, but no amount of planning could prepare them for the emotional complexity of what lay ahead. They were about to face the public for the last time as working royals, knowing that every gesture, every word, and every expression would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. William opened the door, and they stepped out together into the bright morning light. The familiar weight of public expectation settled on their shoulders, but today it felt different. Today it felt like something they were choosing to carry one last time before setting it down forever. Their quiet send-off was about to begin, and with it a new chapter in their extraordinary love story. The black car pulled away from Windsor Castle with unusual quietness. No sirens, no motorcycle escorts, no fanfare, just a simple convoy that looked like any other wealthy family's transportation. William had specifically requested this understated approach for their final journey as working royals. He wanted their last official day to reflect the simplicity and authenticity they hoped to embrace in their new life. Kate sat beside him, watching the familiar countryside roll past the tinted windows. These roads had become so familiar over the years, connecting them to countless engagements, charity events, and official functions. Today, the journey felt like a pilgrimage to their past, a way of honoring everything they were leaving behind while moving toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The mental health charity they were visiting had been close to their hearts for years. William had first encountered the organization during his work with emergency services, where he witnessed firsthand the psychological toll that trauma could take on individuals and families. Kate had become involved after meeting several mothers who struggled with postpartum depression, finding in their stories echoes of her own challenges after childbirth. Their driver, a man who had been with the Royal Protection Team for over 15 years, caught William's eye in the rearview mirror. They had shared countless journeys together, through moments of joy and crisis, celebration and controversy. The unspoken understanding between them reflected the deep relationships that William and Kate had built with their staff over the years. Relationships they would miss as they transitioned to a more private life. As they approached the charity's headquarters, Kate noticed the small crowd that had gathered outside. Word of their visit had somehow leaked, despite their efforts to keep the event low-key. The people waiting weren't the usual royal watchers or tourists, but rather individuals whose lives had been touched by mental health challenges. They held handmade signs expressing gratitude and support, not just for the royal couple's charitable work, but for their decision to prioritize their own well-being. The car slowed as they reached the building's entrance. William could see photographers positioned discreetly across the street, their long lenses ready to capture what they knew would be historic images. The couple had grown accustomed to this constant documentation of their lives, but today, the cameras felt more intrusive than usual. These would be among the last official photographs of them as working royals. Kate checked her appearance one final time in her compact mirror, not out of vanity, but out of respect for the people they were about to meet. She had learned over the years that her role often required her to set aside her own emotions, to provide comfort and inspiration to others. Today would test that skill more than ever, as she struggled to balance her own complex feelings about their decision with her desire to give their final engagement the attention it deserved. The car door opened, and the couple stepped out onto the sidewalk. The small crowd erupted in gentle applause and calls of support. William was struck by the warmth in their voices. There was no anger or disappointment about their decision to step back, only understanding and encouragement. Several people called out messages of thanks for their years of service and wishes for happiness in their new life. A young woman near the front of the crowd caught Kate's attention. She was holding a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old, and tears were streaming down her face. Kate approached her spontaneously, stepping away from the planned route into the building. The woman explained through her tears that the mental health support she had received through the charity had helped her through severe postpartum depression and quite possibly saved her life. The interaction lasted only a few minutes, but it encapsulated everything that William and Kate valued about their royal work. This wasn't about ceremony or tradition. It was about real people facing real challenges and finding hope through connection and support. The young mother's story reminded them why they had been drawn to mental health advocacy and why their decision to step back was ultimately about protecting their own family's emotional well-being. William watched his wife comfort the stranger, marveling at her natural ability to provide exactly what someone needed in their moment of vulnerability. This gift had made her an exceptional royal, but it had also taken a toll on her over the years. The constant emotional labor of public life had sometimes left little energy for processing her own feelings and challenges. As they finally moved toward the building's entrance, Kate turned back to wave at the crowd one more time. These people represented thousands of others whose lives had been touched by their work over the years. The couple had attended hundreds of events and met thousands of individuals, but moments like this reminded them that their impact had been real and meaningful, even as they chose to step away from the formal structure that had enabled it. The charity's director met them at the door, her smile mixing professional warmth with genuine affection. She had worked with William and Kate on multiple projects over the years and understood better than most the personal cost of their public service. Her greeting was warm but mercifully brief. She recognized that this day was already emotionally complex for the couple, without adding unnecessary ceremony. Inside the building, staff members and clients were gathered in a reception area, decorated with photos documenting the charity's work over the past decade. Many of the images featured William and Kate at various events, but seeing them displayed together created a visual timeline of their evolution as both public figures and private individuals. The photos showed them growing more confident and authentic in their roles, but also more aware of the boundaries they needed to maintain. The charity's main conference room had been transformed into an intimate gathering space, with comfortable seating arranged in a circle rather than the formal rows typically used for royal visits. This casual setup immediately put everyone at ease and reflected the couple's desire for their final engagement to feel more like a conversation among friends than a ceremonial obligation. Around the circle sat 12 individuals, whose lives had been significantly impacted by mental health challenges. There was Sarah, a teacher who had struggled with anxiety after a difficult divorce; Marcus, a veteran dealing with post-traumatic stress; Elena, a teenager who had overcome an eating disorder; and David, a businessman who had learned to manage his depression while building a successful company. Each person represented a different face of mental health, breaking down the stereotypes and stigma that the charity worked to combat. William took his seat in the circle, consciously choosing not to position himself at the head of the group. This small gesture spoke volumes about his approach to royal duty. He had always preferred to join conversations rather than lead them from a position of assumed authority. Kate settled beside him, her posture open and attentive, ready to listen rather than speak. The charity's director facilitated the discussion, encouraging participants to share their experiences and insights. What emerged was a powerful conversation about resilience, vulnerability, and the importance of seeking help when needed. William found himself thinking about his own journey with mental health, particularly his struggles with grief after his mother's death and the therapy that had helped him process those complex emotions. Marcus, the veteran, spoke about the isolation he had felt after returning from deployment and how difficult it had been to admit that he needed support. His words resonated deeply with William, who understood the pressure to appear strong and unaffected by life's challenges. The conversation reminded him that their decision to step back from royal duties was itself an act of self-care that could inspire others to prioritize their own well-being. Kate listened intently as Elena described her recovery from an eating disorder, noting the teenager's courage in sharing such personal details. The young woman's story brought back memories of Kate's own struggles with public scrutiny of her appearance and the pressure to maintain a perfect image. She realized that their decision to step away from constant public attention might allow them to model a healthier relationship with privacy and self-acceptance. As the conversation continued, participants began asking William and Kate questions about their own experiences and perspectives. The questions were thoughtful and genuine, focusing not on royal protocol or palace gossip, but on real issues like work-life balance, managing stress, and maintaining relationships under pressure. The couple found themselves speaking more openly than they had in any official setting, their responses unfiltered by usual royal communication strategies. Sarah, the teacher, asked Kate how she managed to stay positive when facing criticism in the media. Kate's response was honest and vulnerable, acknowledging that negative coverage did affect her, but that she had learned to focus on the people and causes that truly mattered to her. She spoke about the importance of surrounding herself with trusted friends and family who could provide perspective and support. The conversation naturally turned to parenting and the challenge of raising children in the public eye. David, the businessman, shared his own struggles with balancing career demands and family time, creating common ground with the royal couple that transcended their different circumstances. William spoke passionately about his desire to give his children as normal a childhood as possible, explaining that this goal had influenced their decision to step back from full-time royal duties. As the formal discussion wound down, participants began chatting informally in smaller groups. Kate found herself in deep conversation with Elena about body image and self-worth, while William connected with Marcus about the importance of male mental health advocacy. These spontaneous connections felt more meaningful than many of the carefully orchestrated interactions they had experienced at formal royal events. The charity's director observed the interactions with satisfaction, knowing that these genuine moments of connection were exactly what their organization aimed to facilitate. She had worked with many high-profile supporters over the years, but William and Kate's authentic engagement with their mission had always stood out. Their decision to step back from royal duties wouldn't end their support for mental health causes, but it would certainly change how that support was expressed. As the afternoon progressed, the emotional weight of the day began to show on both William and Kate. They were fully present for each conversation and interaction, but the knowledge that this was their final official engagement added layers of meaning to every moment. They found themselves memorizing details, the sound of genuine laughter, the warmth of spontaneous hugs, the satisfaction of meaningful conversation that they wanted to carry forward into their new life. A photographer from the charity was discreetly documenting the event, but his approach was completely different from the aggressive media attention they usually faced. His images captured real emotions and authentic interactions rather than posed formal shots. When William and Kate reviewed the photos later, they would see themselves as they truly were, not as royal symbols, but as people committed to making a difference in whatever way they could. The afternoon session concluded with a group reflection on the progress that had been made in mental health awareness and the work that still needed to be done. Participants shared their hopes for the future and their gratitude for the support they had received. Several people specifically thanked William and Kate for their years of advocacy and expressed understanding for their decision to prioritize their family's well-being. As the formal program ended, William and Kate lingered in the room, reluctant to leave this atmosphere of authenticity and connection. They had attended thousands of events over the years, but few had felt as meaningful or personally satisfying as this quiet afternoon of genuine conversation. The experience reinforced their belief that their most important work had always been about human connection, rather than royal ceremony. As the formal session concluded, the charity's director invited William and Kate to take a private tour of the facility's new therapy spaces. These rooms had been funded partially through donations raised at events the couple had attended over the years, making their visit feel like a full-circle moment. The spaces were designed to feel more like comfortable living rooms than clinical treatment areas, with soft lighting, plants, and artwork created by clients who had benefited from the charity's services. In the first therapy room, they met Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a counselor who had been working with the organization for 8 years. She explained how the approach to mental health treatment had evolved during that time, moving away from stigmatizing medical models toward more holistic, person-centered care. William found himself asking detailed questions about the therapeutic process, genuinely curious about methods that might benefit not just others, but potentially his own family as they navigated their transition away from royal life. Kate was particularly drawn to a small room designed specifically for children and teenagers. The walls were covered with colorful artwork and positive affirmations written by young clients. She spent several minutes examining a series of paintings that depicted the journey from darkness to light, created by a 15-year-old girl who had struggled with severe depression. The artwork reminded Kate of her own children and strengthened her resolve to protect them from the pressures that could threaten their mental health. Dr. Walsh shared statistics about the growing need for mental health services, particularly among young people. The numbers were sobering, but she also highlighted the success stories that kept her motivated. She spoke about former clients who had gone on to successful careers, healthy relationships, and fulfilling lives after receiving support during their darkest moments. These stories of transformation resonated deeply with William and Kate, who were in the midst of their own major life transition. The tour continued to a group therapy room where they observed a session in progress. Through a one-way window, They watched 8 teenagers participating in a cognitive behavioral therapy group focused on anxiety management. The facilitator was teaching breathing techniques and coping strategies that the young people practiced together. Kate was struck by how comfortable the teenagers seemed with each other, sharing their struggles and supporting one another without judgment. One of the teenagers in the group was Alex, a 17-year-old who had been struggling with panic attacks that interfered with his education. He had been referred to the charity after multiple emergency room visits that revealed no physical cause for his symptoms. Through individual and group therapy, he had learned to recognize his triggers and develop healthy coping mechanisms. His story particularly moved William, who remembered his own struggles with anxiety during his military service. The group session they observed focused on preparing for stressful situations, like job interviews or public speaking. The irony wasn't lost on William and Kate that they were watching teenagers learn skills they themselves had needed to master as working royals. The difference was that these young people were learning these techniques voluntarily, as tools for personal growth, rather than having them imposed as necessary survival skills for public life. After the observation, they met briefly with Alex and 2 other group participants who volunteered to share their experiences. The young people were articulate and insightful about their mental health journeys, displaying a level of self-awareness that impressed both William and Kate. Alex explained how the group sessions had helped him realize that anxiety was something he could manage rather than something that controlled him. The teenagers asked thoughtful questions about William and Kate's own experiences. With pressure and public scrutiny, their questions were direct but respectful, reflecting the communication skills they had learned through therapy. Kate found herself speaking honestly about the challenges of maintaining mental health while living in the public eye, acknowledging that it was an ongoing process rather than a problem with a simple solution. One teenager, Maria, asked whether they ever felt guilty about having access to resources that many people couldn't afford. It was a profound question that got to the heart of their privilege and responsibility. William's response was thoughtful and honest. He acknowledged their advantages while also recognizing that mental health challenges could affect anyone, regardless of their circumstances. He spoke about their commitment to using their platform to advocate for better access to mental health services for everyone. The conversation with the teenagers lasted longer than scheduled, but nobody seemed to mind. These young people represented a generation that was more open about mental health than any before them, and their perspectives offered hope for reducing stigma in the future. Their willingness to share their stories with strangers demonstrated the confidence and resilience they had built through their therapeutic work. As they prepared to leave the therapy area, Dr. Walsh presented William and Kate with a scrapbook created by clients over the years. The pages contained photos, letters, and artwork from people whose lives had been touched by the charity's work. Many of the contributions specifically mentioned events or initiatives that the royal couple had supported, showing the real-world impact of their advocacy efforts. The scrapbook included a section dedicated to children's drawings depicting their feelings before and after receiving help. The contrast was striking. Dark, chaotic images transformed into bright, hopeful artwork filled with rainbows, flowers, and smiling faces. Kate found herself fighting back tears as she turned through these pages, knowing that similar support could make a difference for countless other children facing mental health challenges. One letter in the scrapbook was from Marcus, the veteran they had met earlier in the day. He had written it 6 months into his therapy, describing how participating in the charity's programs had literally saved his life. He wrote about finding purpose again, rebuilding relationships with his family, and eventually becoming a peer mentor for other veterans struggling with similar issues. His journey from client to advocate embodied the charity's philosophy of turning personal healing into community service. The final section of the scrapbook contained messages of gratitude and support for William and Kate's decision to step back from royal duties. These messages came from clients, staff, and volunteers who understood firsthand the importance of prioritizing mental health and family well-being. Reading these affirmations reinforced the couple's belief that their decision was not only personally necessary, but potentially inspiring to others facing similar choices between obligation and self-care. The final part of their visit took place in the charity's garden, a peaceful outdoor space designed for reflection and meditation. The garden had been created as a therapeutic environment, where clients could connect with nature as part of their healing process. Raised beds filled with herbs and vegetables were tended by participants in the charity's horticultural therapy program, while winding paths led to quiet seating areas perfect for contemplation. William and Kate walked slowly through the garden paths, taking time to appreciate the thoughtful design and obvious care that had gone into creating this healing space. The afternoon sun filtered through mature trees, creating dappled patterns of light and shadow that seemed to change with every step. The sounds of the city felt distant here, replaced by birdsong and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. They paused at a memorial section of the garden, where small plaques honored individuals who had lost their battle with mental illness. The names represented people of all ages, from teenagers to elderly adults, reminding visitors that mental health challenges could affect anyone. Kate read several of the inscriptions, noting how many emphasized love, hope, and the continuing impact these individuals had on their families and communities, despite their struggles. The memorial garden served as both a sobering reminder of the stakes involved in mental health work and an inspiration to continue fighting for better support and understanding. William reflected on his own experiences with loss, particularly his mother's death, and how it had shaped his understanding of grief and healing. The peaceful setting provided a space for these difficult emotions, without the pressure to immediately move past them or appear unaffected. Near the center of the garden stood a large oak tree that had been planted when the charity was founded 12 years earlier. The tree now towered over the surrounding plants, its strong trunk and spreading branches serving as a metaphor for growth and resilience. A simple bench beneath the tree had become a favorite spot for clients to sit and reflect during difficult moments in their therapeutic journey. As they approached the oak tree, they found an elderly woman sitting on the bench, sketching the view across the garden. She introduced herself as Margaret, a volunteer art therapist who had been working with the charity for 5 years. Margaret had begun volunteering after her own successful treatment for depression following her husband's death. Her story illustrated the charity's philosophy that healing often led to service, transforming personal pain into a source of strength for helping others. Margaret showed them her sketch, which captured not just the physical details of the garden, but somehow conveyed its emotional atmosphere as well. She explained that art therapy had been crucial to her own recovery, giving her a way to express feelings that were too complex for words. Now she helped others discover their own creative voices as part of their healing process. The conversation with Margaret naturally turned to the role of creativity in mental health recovery. Kate, who had always been interested in the arts, asked thoughtful questions about how artistic expression could help people process trauma and develop new ways of understanding themselves. Margaret's responses revealed the deep wisdom that came from both professional training and personal experience with mental health challenges. William was particularly interested in Margaret's perspective on resilience and how people found the strength to rebuild their lives after devastating losses. Her insights were profound but grounded in practical experience rather than abstract theory. She spoke about the importance of small daily victories, the power of human connection, and the surprising strength that could emerge from vulnerability. As their conversation continued, other garden visitors began to gather around the oak tree. These were current clients, former clients, staff members, and volunteers who had heard about the special visit and wanted to be part of this informal gathering. The group was diverse in age, background, and life experience, but united by their connection to the charity's mission and their understanding of mental health challenges. What emerged was an organic discussion about hope, healing, and the importance of community support. People shared brief stories about their journeys, offered encouragement to others, and reflected on how their perspectives on mental health had evolved over time. The conversation felt natural and unforced, demonstrating the kind of authentic human connection that William and Kate had always valued most in their royal work. A young father named James shared how the charity had helped him recognize and address his postpartum depression, a condition that many people don't realize can affect fathers as well as mothers. His willingness to be vulnerable about his experience encouraged others to speak openly about their own challenges. The group discussion became a powerful demonstration of how reducing stigma around mental health could create space for healing and growth. The informal gathering lasted nearly an hour, with people coming and going as their schedules allowed. William and Kate found themselves reluctant to leave this circle of authentic conversation and mutual support. The experience represented everything they had hoped to achieve through their royal platform, creating opportunities for meaningful, human connection and breaking down barriers between different groups of people. As the afternoon light began to fade, the charity's director gently indicated that it was time for William and Kate to begin their final departure preparations. The couple stood to say their goodbyes, but the process was complicated by the genuine relationships that had formed during their visit. These weren't formal farewells between strangers, but emotional partings between people who had shared something meaningful together. Margaret presented Kate with her sketch of the garden as a farewell gift, inscribing it with a message about carrying beauty and hope into new chapters of life. The gesture was simple but profound, representing the kind of personal connection that had made their royal work meaningful. Kate accepted the gift with obvious emotion, understanding that it symbolized much more than just a drawing. The group gathered under the oak tree for an impromptu photo, not for publicity purposes but as a personal memento of an extraordinary afternoon. The image would later become one of the most treasured photos in the charity's archives, capturing a moment when the formal boundaries between royal visitors and charity clients dissolved into genuine human fellowship. As William and Kate finally began walking back toward the building, they turned for one last look at the group still gathered under the oak tree. The scene perfectly encapsulated their hopes for their own future, a life where authentic relationships and meaningful work could coexist without the artificial constraints of royal protocol. The charity's main entrance had been transformed during their garden visit. Staff members had quietly arranged a small farewell reception in the lobby, with simple refreshments and displays showcasing the organization's impact over the past decade. Unlike typical royal receptions with their formal protocols and careful staging, this gathering felt like a community celebration among friends who genuinely cared about each other. Local media representatives were present, but they had been asked to maintain a respectful distance and focus on the charity's work, rather than treating the event as a royal spectacle. The photographers captured candid moments of conversation and connection, rather than posed formal shots. This approach reflected William and Kate's desire for their final official engagement to be about substance, rather than ceremony. The reception brought together people from all aspects of the charity's work: board, members, staff, volunteers, current clients, and graduates of various programs. The mix created an atmosphere of authentic community, rather than hierarchical formality. William found himself in conversation with a board member who was also a mental health survivor, while Kate spoke with a group of volunteers who had been inspired to service by their own recovery journeys. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the charity's founder and chief executive, took a few minutes to address the gathered group. Her remarks were personal and heartfelt, focusing on the impact that William and Kate's support had made over the years. She spoke specifically about how their willingness to discuss mental health openly had helped reduce stigma and encourage more people to seek help when they needed it. Dr. Chen's speech included specific examples of how the royal couple's involvement had made a difference. Their participation in fundraising events had enabled the charity to expand its services to underserved communities. Their media appearances discussing mental health had generated thousands of calls to the charity's helpline. Most importantly, their authentic engagement with clients had demonstrated that mental health challenges could affect anyone and that seeking help was a sign of strength rather than weakness. The charity presented William and Kate with a specially commissioned piece of art created collaboratively by clients over several months. The artwork incorporated handwritten messages of gratitude and hope from people whose lives had been touched by the mental health services. The piece would serve as a permanent reminder of the impact they had made and the community they had helped build. As the formal presentations concluded, the reception naturally transitioned into smaller group conversations. William found himself drawn into a discussion about the future of mental health advocacy and how awareness could be maintained and expanded even as public figures stepped back from formal roles. The conversation was sophisticated and forward-thinking, focusing on sustainable strategies for social change rather than celebrity involvement. Kate spent time with a group of mothers who had participated in the charity's perinatal mental health program. These women had experienced various forms of maternal mental health challenges and had found support and community through the charity services. Their conversation touched on the unique pressures facing mothers in the public eye and the importance of normalizing struggles with parenthood and mental health. One of the mothers, Sarah, shared how Kate's previous public discussions about the challenges of motherhood had given her permission to seek help for her own postpartum anxiety. This kind of ripple effect, where public openness about mental health created space for private healing, exemplified the broader impact that William and Kate's advocacy had achieved over the years. The reception also included several young people who had aged out of the charity's youth programs but remained connected as peer mentors and advocates. Their presence demonstrated the long-term relationships that effective mental health support could foster. These young adults spoke confidently about their experiences and their hopes for reducing mental health stigma among their generation. Alex, the 17-year-old they had met earlier, approached William and Kate with a group of his friends from the therapy program. The teenagers had prepared a brief presentation about their vision for mental health advocacy in the digital age. Their ideas were innovative and tech-savvy, incorporating social media strategies and peer support networks that complemented traditional therapeutic approaches. The presentation by the teenagers was both inspiring and humbling for William and Kate. These young people had taken their own healing journeys and transformed them into advocacy for others facing similar challenges. Their energy and commitment represented hope for the future of mental health awareness and demonstrated that effective advocacy could come from many sources, not just high-profile public figures. As the reception continued, William and Kate found themselves reflecting on the evolution of their own understanding of mental health and advocacy. When they had first become involved with the charity, their approach had been more traditional and cautious. Over the years, their engagement had become increasingly personal and authentic as they recognized the power of vulnerability and genuine connection. The conversations throughout the afternoon had reinforced their belief that their most important contributions had come not from their royal status but from their willingness to be honest about challenges and supportive of others facing difficulties. This realization made their decision to step back from formal royal duties feel even more appropriate and necessary. Near the end of the reception, the charity's director announced that a scholarship fund would be established in William and Kate's honor, providing mental health services to individuals who couldn't otherwise afford them. The fund would be supported by donations from people whose lives had been touched by the couple's advocacy work, creating a lasting legacy that would continue their impact long after their formal involvement ended. The announcement of the scholarship fund brought many reception attendees to tears, including William and Kate themselves. The gesture represented exactly what they had hoped their royal platform could achieve, creating sustainable support systems that would outlast their own public roles. The fund would ensure that their years of advocacy translated into concrete help for people in need. As the reception began to wind down, William and Kate took time to personally thank everyone who had been part of their journey with the charity. These individual conversations were brief but meaningful, acknowledging the specific contributions that each person had made to their shared mission. The personal attention they gave to every interaction demonstrated the respect and gratitude they felt for their collaborators in this important work. The final moments of the reception were captured by the charity's photographer, not for public release but for the organization's own archives. These images would serve as a record of a significant transition, both for the royal couple and for the charity that had benefited from their support. The photos showed genuine emotion and connection rather than ceremonial formality. The sun was beginning to set as William and Kate made their way to the charity's entrance for the final time as working royals. The building's lobby, which had been filled with laughter and conversation just an hour earlier, now felt quiet and reflective. Staff members and clients lined the hallway, creating an informal honor guard that felt more like an embrace than a formal farewell. Each person they passed offered a personal goodbye, some with words, others with meaningful looks, and many with gentle touches on the arm or shoulder. These simple gestures carried the weight of shared experiences and mutual respect, built over years of genuine partnership. The warmth and authenticity of these farewells contrasted sharply with the formal protocols that usually governed royal departures. Dr. Chen walked alongside them toward the exit, sharing final thoughts about the impact their partnership had achieved and expressing hope for continued collaboration in the future, albeit in different forms. She acknowledged that while their formal relationship with the charity was ending, the connections they had built and the awareness they had raised would continue to benefit people for years to come. As they reached the main entrance, William and Kate paused to look back at the building that had been the site of so many meaningful encounters over the years. The lobby walls displayed photos documenting their various visits and events, creating a visual timeline of their evolving relationship with mental health advocacy. These images captured their growth not just as public figures, but as individuals committed to making a genuine difference. Outside, the small crowd that had gathered earlier in the day had grown slightly, but the atmosphere remained supportive and respectful. People held signs expressing gratitude for their service and wishes for happiness in their new life. The messages reflected understanding of their decision rather than disappointment, suggesting that their openness about the challenges of public life had resonated with people facing their own difficult choices. William and Kate took time to greet the crowd personally, moving along the gathered well-wishers with genuine interest in their stories and messages. They encountered familiar faces from previous charity events, local residents who had followed their work over the years, and mental health advocates who had been inspired by their efforts. Each interaction felt significant and personal rather than obligatory. Among the crowd was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had attended every public event William and Kate had held in the area over the past 8 years. She had become something of a local fixture, always arriving early with homemade treats and handwritten notes of encouragement. Today, she presented Kate with a small package wrapped in tissue paper, a pair of hand-knitted baby booties for their youngest child, made with obvious love and care. The gift from Mrs. Patterson symbolized the personal relationships that had developed around their public work. These connections transcended the formal boundaries of royal protocol and represented the genuine affection that many people felt for the couple. The booties would become a treasured keepsake, representing not just Mrs. Patterson's kindness, but the broader community support they had experienced throughout their royal journey. As they continued greeting people in the crowd, William and Kate were approached by a group of teenagers who had traveled from a nearby school to express their appreciation for the mental health awareness work. The young people had prepared a short presentation about how their discussions of mental health had influenced their school's approach to student support services. Their initiative demonstrated the ripple effects of advocacy and the potential for young people to become leaders in reducing mental health stigma. The teenagers' presentation was articulate and passionate, reflecting a generation that had grown up with greater awareness of mental health issues thanks in part to advocates like William and Kate. Their confidence in discussing these topics openly showed how much progress had been made in reducing stigma and encouraging help-seeking behavior among young people. The final farewell at the charity took place as the couple reached their waiting car. Dr. Chen and several key staff members gathered for a last group photo, not for public release but as a personal memento of their partnership. The image captured a moment of genuine friendship and mutual respect that had developed through years of working together toward shared goals. As William and Kate settled into their car for the journey home, they were both emotionally drained but also deeply satisfied with how their final official engagement had unfolded. The day had reminded them of everything they valued about their royal work while reinforcing their decision to prioritize their family's well-being and their own mental health. The drive back to Windsor Castle was quiet, with both William and Kate lost in reflection about the day's experiences and the transition ahead. They had said goodbye not just to a single charity partnership, but to a way of life that had defined them for over a decade. The sadness of ending this chapter was balanced by excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. As their car pulled through the gates of Windsor Castle, they could see lights in the windows of their home and knew that their children were waiting inside, probably already in their pajamas and eager to hear about their parents' day. This simple domestic scene represented everything they hoped to protect and prioritize in their new life: the precious ordinariness of family time, bedtime stories, and conversations that weren't scheduled or photographed. The quiet send-off was complete, but its impact would resonate far beyond this single day. The couple had demonstrated that stepping back from public duty could be an act of courage rather than abandonment, and that prioritizing mental health and family well-being was not just acceptable, but admirable. Their farewell had touched hearts worldwide precisely because it was authentic, thoughtful, and deeply human. That evening, As William and Kate tucked their children into bed and reflected on the day's events, they felt a sense of closure about their royal chapter and anticipation about their future. They had said goodbye with grace and dignity, honored their commitments to the end, and left a legacy of meaningful service that would continue to benefit others long after their formal roles had ended. Their quiet send-off had indeed touched hearts worldwide, not through grand gestures or royal pageantry, but through the simple power of authentic human connection and the courage to choose love and family above obligation and tradition.